suggestion was to perhaps start with Alam this year, but for now we'll just continue just with different sugyos, particular sugya that I'm thinking about today. And we're going to look on Maseches Menachos, Daf Chaf Tes Amud Aleph, I believe it is, but let me just make sure. It is the sugya of Rabbi Akiva and Moshe Rabbeinu. And the reason, the Perush that some of this is going to be based on is the Afike Yam. Afike Yam is one of the few svarim, that are fully printed on Aggadah, strictly Aggadah, to be Mavar in Yanim and Aggadah, outside of the Maharsha, in the Ben Yoyada, the Nachlas David, different Meforshim. But this was a sefer from Rav Yitzchak Isaac Chaver, Schusi Galilenu. Rav Yitzchak Isaac Chaver's yard site was last night and today. Rav Yitzchak Isaac Chaver was a third generation student of the Vilna Gaon. So the Gra had a number of students. There was a real distinction historically between the students of the Gaon who saw him face to face, and those tended to be the ones who studied Kabbalah from the Vilna Gaon, and those who didn't necessarily meet him face to face, who were more involved in his teachings in Nigla. So Rav Yisrael Mishklav, for example, who didn't necessarily have a face-to-face encounter with the Gra, spent a lot of time in the Mishnah of Zerayim and studying the laws of Zerayim and Hilchos Eretz Yisrael. But Rav Chaim Volozhin or Rav Chaim Mendel of Shklov, obviously these students were really makabel mipi the Gra, the Gra's Mahalach in Nister, which is certainly more robust than most of the Mahalchim in Nister that we find by anybody from the camp of Hasidus or the students of the Baal Shem Tov. The very few Mikubalim or recent tzaddikim have written as much and as cohesively and with such precision and a focus in terms of the writings of the Tikkun Zohar, the Safra Tzniusa, the Hechalas HaZohar, the Zohar itself, Sefer Yetzirah. The Vilna Gaon was certainly one of the most robust of the recent Mikubalim. And Rav Yitzchak Isaac Chaver never met the Gra, but he was a Talmud Mufak of Rav Menachem Mendel of Shklov. Rav Menachem Mendel of Shklov's Chusay Ganalenu was mamish, one of the bigger tzaddikim that we've had revealed to us in a number of centuries. Rav Menachem Mendel of Shklov, just with his Giluyim and the Torah that he's Megala, is unique. And Rav Yitzchamayr Shlita points out, he said he heard it in the name of Rav Akiva Erlinger. Rav Akiva Erlinger is Rav Yitzchamayr's Talmud Mufak, one of them. His father was the Birchas Avram, Rav Avram Erlinger from Switzerland, who was a Talmud and a Chaver of the Brisker Rav. So his son, Rav Akiva, is the Talmud Mufak of Rav Yitzchamayr, but what Rav Akiva said, and Rav Akiva's thing is, he can show everything Rav Yitzchamayr is showing without recourse to the writings of the Baal Shem Tov and his students, and really showing it through the writings of the Vilna Gaon and his students. And he said to the Rebbe that the hardest of all of the Svarim in the realm of the Kabbalah of the Vilna Gaon is certainly Rav Menachem Mendel of Shklov. And the more people are learning Rav Menachem Mendel of Shklov means the closer we're getting to kind of fully understanding the systems, and full understanding of systems in general in Torah is identifiable, synonymous with kind of the emergent redemption in one way or another. That the redemption of Torah symbolizes the historic redemption. The two are part and parcel of the same thing. We know that there was a kanas on Golus HaTorah, on the concealment of Torah, which is very shaykh to the sugyas of the Vilna Gaon. And what we learned from the Gemara by Rashbi, that the Asid she'yichtachich Torah me'knesses Yisrael, and chas v'shalom lo yishkach mi pizaro. But there's going to be a din of galus haTorah, that the entire Torah is not going to be found in one particular location, and it's going to be adarim, it's going to be here and there, and very similar to the writings of Menachem Mendel of Shklov, who was the Rebbe of Rav Yitzchak Isaac Chaver, and now the Torah is being studied more. It's also Rav Menachem Mendel of Shklov had an apt kind of, not an obsession, a holy intoxication with the letters themselves, the Aleph Beis. He wrote a sefer, Bir Hatzmunos, on the Osios. He spends a lot of time. He explicitly states in his Perush on the Idra Zuta that, and I think it really helps us understand another story of the Gra, that really all a person ever learns is the Aleph Beis. The only thing that a person ever learns in their entire lives is the osios of the Aleph Beis. And in truth, every chiddush that a person has in Torah and every new concept of Torah is just a reiteration of that Aleph Beis in a different form. Meaning the words and the ideas we spell out, we don't have that without the Aleph Beis. And so everything is really studying the Aleph Beis. And the story goes with the Vilna Gaon that there was an old Jew who walked into Vilna, and the Vilna Gaon stood up from him famously. And the story goes that he said, "This is my Rebbe, and he was my Cheder Rebbe who taught me the Aleph Beis." So one can look at this as Midos Tov Osa. He taught the Gra the Aleph Beis, so the Gra considered himself considers him as Rebbe, or in line with Rav Menachem and the Lashkov is saying, we can say he taught him the Aleph Beis, and therefore he's mamish as Rebbe because he gave him the basic elements of everything that he needed to understand. So the Talmud Mufak of Rav Menachem and the Lashkov was Rav Yitzchak Isaac Chaver, who was a tremendous posek as well as an exhaustive writer on Kabbalistic topics, commentaries on his Rebbe as well as his grand Rebbe, the Vilna Gaon's writings. He had a Talmud Mufak named Rav Yitzchak Kellner, or Rav Yitzchak Kahana, who lived in Eretz Yisrael, opened up one of the first Batei Midrashim for Kabbalah by Ashkenazim, kind of like a prototype for Shar HaShemayim, and his writings are all about Vasikin and the Beis HaMikdash, and very much Geula-oriented Torah. So the commentary, or what we're going to be looking at, is based on the Sugya, on the teachings of Rav Yitzchak Isaac Chaver. So the Gemara says as follows. And again, it could be that we'll have a chiddush in this. It could be that we'll just learn the Gemara together. Amar Rav. Rav says, "B'shah sha'ala Moshe l'marom." In the moment and the time when Moshe Rabbeinu ascended above, he went up to Marom. So this could be referring to, obviously, the time that Moshe Rabbeinu went up to receive the Torah from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when he was Allah l'marom. And again, the idea over here, Amarav b'sha'a sha'ala Moshe l'marom, meaning b'sha'a, in the moment, in the hour that Moshe Rabbeinu was Allah l'marom. So there are many ways to describe time. There are many ways to describe certain bodies of time. It could be a minute, it could be an hour, it could be a day. And over here it says sha'a. Now sha'a is very often associated with a significant moment, some sort of appointment, something that has arrived in the face of a person as if this is an urgent matter that needs to be taken care of right now in this sha'a, in this moment, in this kind of construct of time, and it represents a real encounter with the moment. Sha'a is also the lashon of sha'ashua, that tzaddikim point out. Sha'ashua means something that's my plaything. That the sha'ashua of the sha'a is when a person looks at the moment in front of them, and they say that this moment is essential, and I'm able to relate now to this moment not as just a passing moment, but rather as the moment, as if this sha'a right in front of me, this sha'a achas, like Chazal say, Yafa sha'a achas ba'olam haza, yotzer mikol ta'anugim ba'olam haba, something along those lines. It's daika this sha'a. Sha'a zeh, which sha'a? This one, whichever one you're standing in. So the sha'a sha'ala Moshe l'marom. So Chazal are showing us perhaps what it means to be prepared to be oila l'marom. It has to be by way of encountering the sha'a, this moment. In Breslov also, whenever it comes to Hisbodedus by Rabbi Nachman, it was always about a sha'a of Hisbodedus, an hour of Hisbodedus, which can mean an hour, which was a practical insight that many of the tzaddikim gave, to spend an hour each day talking to the Rabbanu Shlalem about an issue of whatever kind. But sha'a also means, Rav Levi Yitzchak Bender, Schusa Gamalenu, pointed out that sha'a doesn't necessarily mean an hour of Hisbodedus, but it could mean a sha'a of leaning into the moment itself and really being present there. So, Amarav b'sha'a sha'ala Moshe l'marom. In the moment that Moshe Rabbeinu went on high, Matzu lahakadosh baruch hu sheyoyshev v'koysher kesarim la'osios. He found that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was sitting and tying crowns to the letters. So again, all of these lashonos, matzu, a mitzia is a mashma'us, that it's something that was almost a traumatic discovery. A mitzia is something that comes out of nowhere. It's a behesa chadas. It's yagati umatzati ta'amim. What do you mean? Why? I was miyageya, so why do I need to believe in it? Because a mitzia is something that a person stumbles upon. It's something that was unexpected. So this was a vision, this was an encounter that Moshe Rabbeinu had in this moment where he was ready to perceive a deep truth that he did not expect himself to be ra'ui or ready to receive. He saw that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was sitting, Yoshev, v'koysher kesarim la'osios. So obviously, anytime we see in Chazal, in Torah Shebachsav, and Torah Shebal Peh, we have to be very aware that the anthropomorphic elements that we use to describe the Rabbanu Shlalem as sitting or writing is dimyon. It's by way of imagination. It's by way of the mind's eye perceiving what it might mean for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to express himself to us. But also, phrased differently, in a very important kind of shift, what the Shlach HaKadosh spends a lot of time speaking about, and we spend time talking about this, I believe, in the shir on the Mishnah in Beitza about Chamisha Dvarim Ne'emar B'Gacheles, about the 5 things that are said by the Gacheles, that in truth, this yeshiva, right, Hashem is sitting, Hashem is tying. So we can look at this in one of two ways. I tie things and I sit, and therefore in order for me to understand the Rabbeinu Shalom in a context that I can understand him, so Hashem must sit and Hashem must tie. So I understand sitting and tying to represent one thing, and therefore this is what I understand or extrapolate from my experience to apply to God, so to speak. But what the Shlach Kadosh tells us is very different. He says that when we see these terms or these phrases by the Rabbeinu Shalom, they are in truth in their essential form, klape the Rabbeinu Shalom, and they're only in their questionable, borrowed form with regards to us. We tend to think that I actually sit, and therefore I imagine God to sit. Rather, what the Shlach Kadosh tells us is Adra Be'ibcha Mastabra. HaKadosh Baruch Hu sits. That's Metzias. That's one of the ways that the Rabbeinu Shalom engages with reality. This thing called yeshiva. Whatever associations or synonyms the Torah HaKadosh tells us about yeshiva. Because the Rabbeinu Shalom has this concept of yeshiva or kashira, sitting or tying, therefore there's a mashal in our own experiences as to how to understand that, and that's what yeshiva or kashira is. This reorientation of how we look at these languages that describe the Rabbeinu Shalom are important in the sense that, yes, a person can learn Chassidus, a person can learn Machshava, a person can learn Kabbalah, Musar, whatever it is, and say every action of mine is endowed with significance. Everything down here is expressive of the infinite light of the Rabbeinu Shalom. And I could spend the whole time looking how science describes the Rabbeinu Shalom, how mathematics, how medicine, how whatever system down here uses to describe the Rabbeinu Shalom, I might come to say that this is the essential thing. Forget about the origin. The essential thing is the metaphor we see down here. But what we're seeing is that, no, the ideas are truly true by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Their expressions down here, the fact that magnetism, the fact that quantum physics, the fact that mathematics in their purest form, the fact that scientific discovery reflects certain truth in the Torah, that's true, but that's by no means the essential. The essential thing is that Hashem sits and Hashem ties. Does that make sense, that distinction? Ish? Okay. Let's go weiter. So he finds that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was sitting and tying crowns to the letters, Kasarim la'osios, so which we know is to be the Tagin, right? The Tagin of the Osios, the certain crowns that jut out of the Osios. Amar lefanav Rabbeinu Shalom, mi ma'akev al yadcha? Who's stopping you from giving this Torah? Mi ma'akev al yadcha? What's the hold up? Why are things not taking place? Why is this Torah not being given? Masha kasavta sha'ata tzarich lahoisif oir alehem ksarim. What makes you think? What makes you think that you need to tie more? Why is there a feeling that the Torah is not ready to be given over? Why are there more crowns that you have to be doing it? Amar lefanav Rabbeinu Shalom, the Rabbeinu Shalom says to Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu says to Rabbeinu Shalom, Mima akev al yadcha. Amar lo adam echad yesh sa'ashted lihiyos b'soif kamadoyres va'akiva ben Yosef shemo. That there is a certain person, adam echad, yesh, there's a person, sha'asid lihios, that in the future stands at the ready to be revealed, basof, at the end, kamadoros, va'akiva ben Yosef shemo, and his name is Akiva ben Yosef, sha'asid lidra sha'kol koitz v'koitz, telin v'telin shal halachos. He is the one who is the reason that I'm tying these crowns to the letters, because he's the one who's going to understand the secrets at the heart of all of these letters. So we meet Rabbi Akiva. Who is Rabbi Akiva? So first off, Chazal tell us Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva is Adam Echad. Rabbi Akiva is a single person. What does it mean, Adam Echad? Adam Echad means that a person whose entire life was the secret of Achdus. This is how Rabbi Akiva spent his entire life. He was Doiresh Echad. He wanted to understand all of his life. What does it mean to love HaKadosh Baruch Hu to the point of expiration, to the point of Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad? The entire concept, the entire sugya of Rabbi Akiva is the concept of Achdus. Which is why it's such pegam when his Talmidim have machlokas and shnios, because it's the polar opposite of what their Rebbe was. If Rabbi Akiva represented Limud HaTorah, then the Chevra's disunity with one another wouldn't necessarily have been such a fundamental flaw at the core of their purpose. But because their Rebbe was teaching them one thing and one thing only, it was echad, it was one, it was unity. It was to be able to see life, reality, a person, experience in the lens of a unified whole, so that's why it was such a pagam. And that's why perhaps that Rabbi Akiva is referred to as an Adam Echad. He was a person of Achdus. We see, right, that when Rabbi Akiva is Oile Lamaram, very similar to Moshe Rabbeinu's Aliyah Lamaram, which we see in Menachos Chagiga about the Aliyah Lapardes. Rabbi Nachman has a famous Torah about this in the 51st teaching in Likutei Maharan, where Rabbi Akiva says, "Kishetegiu la'avnei shayesh tohar," when you come to the chamber of hewn kind of marble, right? When you come to the Hechalos, when you come to behold the visions of how things operate in the intermediary spaces where it appears that there might be some perception of separation between God and the forces that are engaged in reality, al tomru mayim mayim. Don't say mayim mayim. Don't double it. Ki davar sheker lo ya'amod l'nagad einav. Because something that is untrue will never stand and never be worthy of standing in the eyes of a person. And what Rabbi Nachman describes is that the entire clarion call of Rabbi Akiva was to be Megala, the Indian of Echad. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Mayim is fine, but mayim, to double it, to say that it's doubled, that's already losing the perspective. Rabbi Akiva's Indian was an Adam Echad. You don't necessarily see this in the world. Rabbi Akiva's entire Metzias came to be Megali, the fact that even if it doesn't look like Echad, it's still Echad. Rabbi Akiva is one of the few Tanaim, along with Reish Lakish, who we understand that wasn't Echad necessarily throughout his life. He spent his life in two separate stages. In the beginning, he was an Ahma Aretz. He was stuck in that Yesh. He was stuck in the Yeshus. He was stuck in this worldliness to the extent that he hated Talmidei Chachamim to the point that he wanted to break their Etzem. What does Etzem mean? He said, I want to bite the Talmidei Chachamim like a donkey bites a bone. Etzem represents something that is unified. Etzem means essence. It's a unified singular essence. Rabbi Akiva wanted the chumrius, the chamor. He wanted the chamor to bite the etzem. He wanted chumrius and this worldliness to kind of shatter the concept of etzem because he wanted to so desperately break away from this idea of echad. Yet we see that Rabbi Akiva comes to a place of achdus, which is Mangala Milsala Mafreya, that the whole thing was achdus. Everybody with me on this, Indian? Now we find something very interesting by the Ramchal. By Rabbeinu Moshe Chaim Latzato. The Ramchal, Rav Aryeh Kaplan pointed this out in his introduction to his commentary on, to his translation of Derech Hashem. It's a frightening point. He says that Rabbi Akiva only started learning Torah at 40. So what that leaves is the first 39 years of his life. So what happened to the 39 years of his life? The Ramchal came along to be metakein on whatever level that means, the first 39 years of Rabbi Akiva's life, which is why the Ramchal passed away at the age of 39, which is why they're both buried together or allegedly buried together in Tiberia. I don't mean allegedly to question the whether Rabbi Akiva's body is there or not doesn't make whether the Ramchal's there or not doesn't make much of a difference. They're buried there, and whether or not it's their actual burial place is still something under discussion, I believe. But the Ramchal identified very much with Rabbi Akiva in the letters that he was writing. Meaning when the Ramchal was chased away, the Ramchal had Yisurin She'ein Kamohu, just like Akiva ben Yosef had Yisurin She'ein Kamohu. Chased by Malchus and experiencing suffering, the Ramchal is writing, and people are asking him, how are you doing this? The Ramchal was writing Mesilas Yesharim when he was exiled to Amsterdam, meaning at the heart of his being judged and spit on and laughed at and ridiculed for being the tzaddik that he was, it was specifically then that he was able to give us Mesilas Yesharim, which just makes the Sefer even more miraculous, because that's the Giloy of Echad. Mesilas Yesharim, we know, has 26 chapters, 26 prakim, Keneged Hashem Havaya. Rav Yerucham Levavitz of Mir said that in truth, all a person should ever be learning is Mesilas Yesharim, because it's koilel all of the Kabbalah of the Ramchal. And I saw an amazing sefer. There's this a beer on Mesilas Yesharim that says as follows, based on this idea of Rav Yerucham of Mir, that when you're learning Mesilas Yesharim, you should see that it's really the sum total of the Ramchal's kind of Nistaros HaTorah. If you read the Hakdama, now you understand a little bit differently. The Ramchal was not allowed to write in Inyane Kabbalah. At first, the first takana was he couldn't write in Aramaic anymore, because people didn't find it appropriate for a 21-year-old to be writing down a new Zohar that he was receiving from a celestial force of sorts. And so Rabbi Akiva was forced to hide his writings. But what Rabbi Akiva writes as follows in the beginning of Mesilas Yesharim: nothing that you're going to see in here is new. It's all things that you know already, but there's value in reviewing things. So that can be seen as a fundamental way of looking at any concept of thinking, but what this Machaber wanted to point out is the Ramchal was coding in his Hakdama that really I'm revealing to you something you know already before. From what? From all of my Kabbalah Svarim, and now it's just reviewing what you know already. So that was an interesting thing. In the letters that the Ramchal was writing from that time, there's all these lashonos of identifying as Akiva ben Yosef. Just like Akiva was able to say Gamzu L'Toiva, Rabbi Akiva was able to learn the secret of everything being transformed into the good, Afilu Misa. At that point, so the Ramchal was saying, I am encountering the light of Akiva ben Yosef, which is the light of Adam Echad, the ability to be ma'ached things in this world. We know that all of the Mishnayos are in accordance with Rabbi Akiva. Why? Because Rabbi Akiva is the Sheresh of Torah Shebal Peh. Rav Tzadok explains this, the Arizal explains this in different order, obviously. But what does it mean that Rabbi Akiva is the Sheresh of the Torah Shebal Peh? Torah Shebal Peh, in relationship to Torah Shebechsav, or Rabbi Akiva in relationship to Moshe, represents a very sharp distinction between the way that we look at information, the way we look at spirituality, and the way we look at Torah. Torah Shebechsav is considered a klal. Everything is revealed in it. Everything is clear. It's considered a unified model. It's Torah min hashamayim. It's something that descends from above to below in a very clear way. Torah Shebal Peh, on the other hand, is a symptom of exile, which is the shattering of a singular truth into many voices. And it's a movement from below to above. It's the opposite of this divine truth. It's a human truth to a certain degree. And so, generally speaking, there is a tremendous chiluk, or distinction, or separation between Torah Shebechsav and Torah Shebal Peh. To the point that the Tzedukim came along and said, you're trying to make two Torahs. You're trying to make two Torahs. There's mayim here, there's separation here. But what Rabbi Akiva was doing, the entire avodah of Rabbi Akiva, is to be ma'ached Torah Shebal Peh within Torah Shebechsav. Is to reveal that these two expressions of Torah, the Moshe Rabbeinu and the Rabbi Akiva, both are part and parcel of the very same expression of Torah, what's referred to as the Trei Torahs, the twin Torahs, the Nigla and the Nister, Torah Shebechsav and Torah Shebal Peh. So it's not coincidental that it's specifically Rabbi Akiva who gives us over, and Chazal referred to him as Ish Echad, because his entire avodah was to be ma'ached. Everybody with me on this? So, a person there's a lot to say about the sugya of Rabbi Akiva, and we'll go a little bit more into it. But Echad, the Vilna Gaon points this out, Rav Menachem and Shklov points this out, the Tzadikim and Talmidim and the Baal Shem Tov point this out as well, is that Echad is the gematria of 13, which is also the gematria of Ahava, which is also what the sugya over here is. The Tage HaOsios, Rav Kook points out, and all the Meforshei HaOsios point out, is really a tag, is like a hook. It's something that is connecting something to above. And we'll see the 7 letters of Shatnez Gates, which are the letters that demand 3 tagin, are letters that are associated with instability, letters that are associated with a brokenness. Shatnez Gates. Shatnez is an admixture which is inappropriate. There's a confusion that has taken place. There's a mayim b'mayim. Gates is a spark that appears to descend away from its original origin. And because those letters, those 7 letters, are the letters that seemingly can appear to be devoid of their unifying factor, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu was being koisher kasarim, he was tying on those hooks in order to teach us how to connect that which appears to be separate above, back again. But what do the tzaddikim say? They say that how are we makasher Torah Shebechsav and Torah Shebal Peh? How do we bring this apparent separation and unify it to reveal that in truth it's not mayim b'mayim, but it's really only one thing? And that is through the Yud Gimel Midos Sha'atorah Nidreshas Bahen. The Yud Gimel Midos Sha'atorah Nidreshas Bahen, the 13 hermeneutical principles through which the Torah is understood, is really the pathway in which we transition from Torah Shebechsav into Torah Shebal Peh. Without the Yud Gimel Midos Sha'atorah Nidreshas Bahen, there is no Torah Shebal Peh. Which is why the Talmidim of the Gaon point out that in the Yud Gimel Midos Sha'atorah Nidreshas Bahen are the gematria of Echad, because the entire tachlis of those midos is to be ma'ached them. It's also the Talmidim of the Baal Shem Tov point out, based on the Zohar HaKadosh, and Rav Yosef Engel brings this down almost lahalacha, that the 13 midos Sha'atorah Nidreshas Bahen also correspond directly to the 13 midos of Rachamim. Which is why, Ein Oinshin Min Hadin, for example. A Kal V'chomer can't be used to bring about a punishment. Why? Because Kal V'chomer corresponds to the midah of Kel. Kel is Rachamim. And therefore you're never going to find the punishment associated with the midah of Rachamim. It's also associated, says the Bnei Yissaschar, with the 13 tikkunim of the beard. Okay, the tzaddikim talk about, 13 different elements of the beard, spots on the beard that represent, certain places on a person's face that represent certain spiritual potencies. So why is it that Bnei Yissaschar asks that when a person is oimid in a kasha and they don't understand how to be miyashev a stira between Torah Shebechsav and Torah Shebal Peh, that a person tends to stroke their beard? It's because what a person is trying to be ma'ir, those Yud Gimel Midos HaRachamim, which correspond to the Yud Gimel Midos Sha'atorah Nidreshas Bahen, which is the Echad and the Ahava. And Rabbi Akiva's entire inyan was Ahava. He died in the Heichal of Ahava. The Zohar HaKadosh says that Rabbi Akiva was Moser Nefesh B'Ahava, and that he entered into the Heichal of Ahava, which is why we learn so much about Rabbi Akiva from the Ahava Azakamavas, from the willingness to give oneself over completely for the sake of the Rabbanu Shloim, out of love, out of that secret of Or Zarua L'Tzadik U'L'Yishrei Lev Simcha. Because there was the Kasha. The Or Zarua didn't know how to spell Akiva on a get. Okay, it wasn't clear if it should be an aleph or a hey. And there's a long sugya about it within the Meforshim. The Chassam Sofer has, it's a sugya that goes from Nister, Chasidus, into Halacha. It's an incredible sugya. But what the Or Zarua, he had a dream, I believe, that he was supposed to spell Akiva with a hey, and therefore he said, and the dream was that the letters Akiva are Sofei Tevos, Or Zarua Letzadik Ulu Yishrei Leiv Simcha. So it's Or, which is Reish, Zarua, which is Ayin, Letzadik, which is Kuf, Uli Yishrei, which is Yud, Leiv, which is Beis, and Simcha, which is Hey. So he decided that he was going to spell it with a Hey, and in honor of that, Davar Chalom that he had, he named the Sefer Or Zarua. But what does that pasuk mean? Or Zarua Letzadik Uli Yishrei Leiv Simcha. There's a light that is sown for the tzaddik, and for the straight ones of heart have joy. Or Zarua means that there's something that is planted. An act of planting is an act of desperation. There appears to be no hope from this seed that I'm now planting into the ground. There appears to be nothing good that can emerge out of this act of destruction, which is why Chazal referred to Zra'im as what? As emunos, because Zriya is an act of emunah. I am literally giving over my possession in the hopes that it will regenerate. It's an impossible, unfathomable thing. Applied to a psychological register, a person encounters darkness. How could it be that anything positive will emerge out of this? But the Yishrei Leiv Simcha, the light is sown, and the tzaddik understands that if you're straight on the narrow and you realize that it's going to go from one point to another, and there's a yashrus to it, then a person has the possibility of uncovering simcha even in the state of zriya, even in the state of choshech. Who did Rabbi Akiva learn this from? Rabbi Akiva obviously learned this from Nachum Ish Gamzu. Nachum Ish Gamzu's entire experience was Gamzu L'Taiva. Gamzu L'Taiva, which is the ability to recognize that even that which appears to be outside the purview of holiness is also going to be contained within holiness. So this is why perhaps Chazal referred to as Rabbi Akiva as Adam Echad. Adam Echad, and you can even read Adam Echad Yesh. Yesh is generally seen as separation and thingness and somethingness and reality, which bespeaks a duplicitous nature. But Adam Echad, there's one person, Adam, there's one person, Echad Yesh, he has the power to be Miyached Yesh. And that's why Rabbi Akiva specifically, when they're Oila Le'avne Shayish Tahor, he says, Al Tikru Mayimayim, don't see twice. Shayish is the language of Yesh v'Yesh. And he's able to transform that yesh and yesh, that apparent duplicity at the heart of things, to the yasis alayach alekayach kimsas chasan al kala. Yasis alayach is that double joy that transforms what appears to be a separate perspective, good and bad, yesh and yesh, and it reveals the unity at the heart of it. Shosha asid lios besof kama doiros v'Akiva ben Yosef shemo. So Akiva ben Yosef, we're not going to go in. Rabbi Akiva represents a paradigm referred to as Mashiach ben Yosef, which is this concept of struggle prior to revelation, as opposed to revelation that kind of comes after struggle, or without struggle, which is Mashiach ben David. Rabbi Akiva is very much involved in this. Shlach na biyad tishlach. When Moshe Rabbeinu was told to take the Jewish people out of Mitzrayim, he said, Shlach na biyad tishlach, send with who you're going to send with. And Chazal tell us, and the Meforshim say, that he was saying, send them out with Akiva ben Yosef. What are you sending them out with me for? So Moshe sees that Hashem is tying crowds to the letters, and he says, why? And Hashem says, because there's this person, Akiva ben Yosef, who's going to come, and in the future he's going to be doiresh, al kol koitz v'koitz, teilin shal halachos. What's a koitz? What's a koitz? It's a point, right? But it's also a language of a kutz and a koitz v'dardar. It's also a sting and pain and yisurin and difficulty. And not only was Rabbi Akiva able to be darish on kol koitz v'koitz tilin shal halachos, but al kol koitz v'koitz b'chayiv, he was able to encounter the suffering that he encountered, or the difficulty he encountered, all of the kates and the endings of things in his life, and the difficulty and the running and the returning and the ups and the downs, and he was able to darish them latova. He was able to be darish them like Nachum Ish Gamzu, or he was able to say Gamzu latova. And he was able to connect them to tilin shal halachos. And halacha, again, it's halacha's Roshei Tevos, the Tikkun Zohar says, halacha's Roshei Tevos, hariu laHashem kol haaretz, that the entirety of existence should reveal the grandeur of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I mean, this is basically, I believe, the thesis in Rav Soloveitchik's Chusay Hagen Alenu's halachic man, that halacha is meant to be a construct that enables a person to see the grandeur and the glory of the Rebbeinu Shalom emerging out of measurements, out of physicality, out of every element. That's what halacha is. It's the linchpin that allows me to bring that light of spirituality down here. So Rabbi Akiva was able to be darish al kol koitz v'koitz, on each and every one of these kutzim, these stings in life, and he was able to see all of the hariu laHashem kol haaretz come out of it. Amar lefanav, Moshe Rabbeinu says, Rebbeinu Shalom, harehu li, show him to me. This is the chutzpah of Moshe Rabbeinu, the chutzpah of the kedusha that we see in Chazal also, where not the chutzpah, the kedusha of Moshe Rabbeinu, the shirish of Nishmas Yisrael, the Moshe Yafa Amart, that we could all say we spoke well because we are Moshe. Moshe Rabbeinu says to Hashem, he says, Hashem, you're going to blame the Jewish people for X, Y, or Z. You made them this way. They're like a child who's placed in front of a Beis Hazonos with a kupa shel kesef around their neck. What's referred to by Chazal as Hetiach Devarim Klape Mala. They called HaKadosh Baruch Hu out, Kavyachol, and they utilized HaKadosh Baruch Hu's very claim to like Rav Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev would do, to say, Rebbeinu Shleilim, this is not a bad thing, this is a good thing. You're responsible, etc., etc. That type of language, Rabbi Akiva Moshe Rabbeinu was able to do that. And so when Moshe Rabbeinu says, Harehuli, show him to me. Show him, because on a certain level he couldn't believe that there was a person who could exist like this, who was able to see the light in each and every kotz. Amar lo. So what Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu is Chazor la'achorecha. Chazor la'achorecha. This is an amazing thing. I'm just thinking now, again, all of this is b'derech efshar. Moshe Rabbeinu's whole inyan was that he wanted to be Masek HaKadosh Baruch Hu panim b'panim. He wanted the Torah Shebechtav experience, where things are revealed. It's panim b'panim. He requests, Hareini na'as koidecha, show me panim l'panim. And what Hashem's response is that you cannot see me and live. Zak l'Hashem shebo achaloma. What do we learn from this? We learn that it is impossible for a person to grasp HaKadosh Baruch Hu panim l'panim. It's not symptomatic of some failure, because if it was any other person who asked and was denied access to Hashem, then we could have said, it's a result of human frailty and failure. But it was Moshe Rabbeinu who was the closest to the possibility of being perfect, and Moshe Rabbeinu was told that you can't see my panim. And the Hashem says, why? Because choiku lefi chukei habriya, it's a law that's built into the laws of existence, she'ein hanivra yachol lahasig es haboira, that the created individual can never fully grasp the Creator, can never fully have a unity. There always has to be some element of separation.
What is the Tanai of B'chai?
The what?
In Odorayni B'chai.
In Adam Yoreni B'chai, because on the Yom HaMisa, the Zohar HaKadosh says a person is capable of seeing.
There is a capability.
When a person is no longer, but again, Misa is a relative term, and it just means from the level of what I conceive right now, from my perspective, when I look upwards, this is the ceiling. And so the ceiling appears to be the highest that I can go, and I can't see beyond the ceiling. But once I get beyond the ceiling, I come to realize that what was beyond the ceiling is simply the ground of the next floor, and there's a new ceiling. So a person is never ever fully grasping the panim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because a person can't grasp the panim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's kedushasi l'mala mikdushaseichem. My holiness is above and beyond your holiness. That is a fundamental clause at every level. But relative to the experience right now, all I can grasp is the achor. Then I come to a place of panim, only to realize that in relationship to the next panim, I'm still in a state of achor.
B'chai is shas misa.
But lo yoreni ha'adam v'chai means that on this level, within the confines of human experience, a person is going to be incapable of grasping the essence of godliness. But that limitation does not only apply to this life, it applies to every stage of growth. It applies to every stage of spiritual growth, as well as every stage of the experience of the neshama. As Chazal say that tzadikim ein lahem menucha lo ba'olam hazeh v'lo ba'olam haba, because they're hoylech min chayil el chayil. What are you talking about? What avodah is there to do? La'asid lavo. If we're mace and we can see elama, there's always avodah. Always avodah. So Moshe Rabbeinu is requesting this panim type of experience, right? He wants to see this. And he asks the same question here. He sees Rabbi Akiva, who has the ability to be doirish, al kol koitz v'koitz. Rabbi Akiva has the ability to see unity in everything. So Moshe Rabbeinu has the same request. Hareinu lo, show me. Hareini nas kvodecha, show me this person who's able to grasp the panim. Show me this person who's able to grasp everything. And look at this answer that the Rebbeinu Shleilim says. He says, chazor la'achorecha. It's not that you can see it. It's not a darga in panim. Rabbi Akiva is not zocha to this clarity of achdus because he had a seamless life of panim el panim. Ella, he experienced it by way of the achorayim. He experienced it from the cloudiness of life. He experienced it from the darkness of life. And if you want to understand the secret of Rabbi Akiva, who is capable of seeing the unity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, specifically within the coats, so don't ask to see it. Don't ask to see it like Harini Nas Kodecha, Hariulo, show him to me. Elama, Chazor la'achorecha, experience that experience of what it means to be a Jew who lives in the achorecha with the darkness and the concealment of this worldliness, and then you'll be able to understand the secret of Rabbi Akiva. That's B'derech Esher. So halach v'yashav besof shmona shiros. So Moshe Rabbeinu goes and he sits 8 rows behind. Now, 8 rows behind, Rav Yitzchak Isaac Chaver discussed, it's correspondent to Bina. 8 is a very important level. It's L'mala min hateva, it's Shaykh to Chanukah. Chanukah, again, is the light that emerges out of darkness. A person has to descend all of those levels back in order to see the light that emerges 1, and then 1 and 2, and then 1, 2, and 3, like we see by the Neiros Chanukah, but we'll go weiter from the 8. There's a lot to say about it. Chazor la'acharecha, and he goes back and he sits in the back. V'lo haya yodea mahin oimrim. And Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't understand what they were saying. Now again, here is both the problem and the answer. Lo haya yodea. On the level of Moshe Rabbeinu trying to have the das, which is what Moshe Rabbeinu is. Moshe Rabbeinu is the expression of das, of Klal Yisrael, Kedas Moshe Yisrael. Das, as all the tzaddikim describe, is the experience of Moshe Rabbeinu. When we are truly encountering the Torah, it is the aspect of Nishmas Moshe in our own das, in our own mind, the das of Moshe that is connecting to the Torah's Moshe. Each and every yid has an akuda of Moshe Rabbeinu within them, which is why the Moreh Naim has something incredible to say. The Moreh Naim says, what does it mean, lo yada ishes kfura? So the same lo yada that we're experiencing, that Moshe Rabbeinu says, lo yada mahayu oimrim. Lo yada maya oimrim, lo yada ishkas kfuraso. Ki'ilu Moshe Rabbeinu is buried in that secret of lo yada, of what it means to not know. Why didn't we know where Moshe Rabbeinu is buried? Chazal give us an answer, but what the Moreh Naim says is because he's buried in each and every person, and you can't know what's buried within you. I can't know what's buried within me, because Moshe Rabbeinu is buried within me. And based on the Gra, the Baal HaSadeh, one of the biggest Sfardi Mekubalim, brings down his Perush on Otzros Chaim in the name of the Gra that the only way that Mashiach comes is when every spark of Moshe Rabbeinu within each and every person, the Talmud Chacham, the Nakuda of Das within them, is expressed properly. And then when all of those nitzotzos of Moshe come back, so that's how we're machzir Moshe Rabbeinu from a burial place that is not good for him, Shelo Hagunle, which is Mul Beis Pa'or, because Bilam was the Achorayim of Das, Bilam was the opposition of Das, he sought separation. And so, I'm going a little bit weiter in my own mind on this. But suffice it to say that on the one hand, lo haya yodea, he didn't know what was being taught. And therefore, theoretically, he couldn't grasp what Rabbi Akiva was saying. And therefore, it was tashash kocho. He had a little bit of a descent in his strength. But the emes, what we're going to see also is that the lack of understanding that Moshe Rabbeinu encountered in trying to understand the secret of Rabbi Akiva is the very secret of Rabbi Akiva. That Rabbi Akiva didn't understand. Rabbi Akiva simply chose to see achdus everywhere. Rabbi Akiva simply chose to affirm unity at the heart of all things, to say Gamzu Latova no matter what. Gamzu Latova, Gamzu Latova, Gamzu Latova. Even when every aspect of existence bespeaks the opposite, Rabbi Akiva's stubbornness and that stubborn faith was the unwillingness to see anything but Achdus. Afilu kishazarkin as basar b'masreiko shel barzel. Even when they were destroying him in all matters of destruction, all there was Achdus. It was Echad, Echad, Echad. He lost 24,000 students. It doesn't make a difference. Echad. He went and found Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. He went and found all of his Talmidim. He learned this from where? He learned this from Nachamish Gamzu, the ability to have nechama, the ability to find nechama. What's the secret of nechama? That Gamzu l'toiva, how, why, in what way, it doesn't matter how or why. It's the unmovable belief that everything is l'tova. So lo haya yodea mahin oimrim, he didn't understand what they were saying, he didn't know what they were saying, so tashash kocho, he lost a lot of his strength. Kivan shehigia l'davar echad, what davar echad, again, we see what's happening in this Gemara. When they came to davar echad, so typically you can read it, they found one thing that they were discussing. But in truth, in this celestial based medrash, Rabbi Akiva, they came to davar echad. They said the Talmidim say, okay, Rabbi, we hear all the Torah, but where's the davar echad coming from? Where's the achdus at the heart of all of it coming from? Where's the achdus? Where's the ish echad? How do you learn to say, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem echad? When the Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva came to that davar echad, they saw that achdus at the heart of it, this thing that Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't understand because Hashem had barred him from that direct access. So the Talmidim say, Rebbe, minayin lecha. Where do you have this from? Amar lahen, and he answers them, halacha l'Moshe misinai. So halacha l'Moshe misinai. Halacha l'Moshe misinai. The inyan of halacha l'Moshe misinai is the incomprehensible truth that exists at the heart of the Torah, irrespective of any aspect of human understanding. It's the simple fact what the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh refers to as kacha, the keser kol haksarim, kacha. That's how it is. Beli tam v'das. That halacha l'Moshe misinai is the secret that, in the end of the day, all human understanding and all attempts at intellectualization and grasp and iyun and lumdus and every element of our ability to understand the Torah does not come even close to understanding and discerning the true depth of even one dot of one letter of the Torah. This is what Rav Chanan Wasserman Hashem Yimkom Damo says on Torahs Hashem Tamima, that even after Torahs Moshe, even after Torah Sheba'al Peh, even after the Rishonim, the Achronim, and every element of Torah from the beginning of history towards the end, it's still Torahs Hashem Tamima. It's still only halacha l'Moshe Misinai. It's an Indian of a kala. It's the kala of Moshe Rabbeinu. It's the secret of Tzipora. It's the secret of that light that comes out of that dark place and the need for Klal Yisrael to descend into Mitzrayim for the sake of the elevation afterwards. It's halacha l'Moshe Misinai. That achdus, that ability to see oneness at the heart of everything, it comes from Moshe Rabbeinu. It comes from that place of Lamala Mitam V'das. And at that point, Nisyashva Daito, specifically Daito, his das was Misyashev. Lo haya yada, he didn't know, the Nisyashev daitzo, because das is the ability to connect above and below. Das v'yadata hayom v'hashivoisa el levavecha. Adam yada eschava. Das is always and forever seen as the unity of two opposites that in the beginning appear to be impossible because of their separation, but through the secret of das, through the secret of knowledge, which is rooted in that place of far beyond knowledge, we somehow, some way make unity between these two things. That's the secret of das. Es hashemayim ve'es ha'aretz. And Moshe Rabbeinu was now able to see the connection between that which appeared to be distant from him and that which was now close to him. Chazar uba lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now Moshe Rabbeinu returns back from that Achorayim experience. He comes back, those 8 rows up. Now he's moving back into a place of desiring panim el panim. He's now moving back to try and understand things in their absolute clarity. He comes back again with a claim to the Rabbanu Shloim. Chazar uba. Ba, this language of ba, uba, uboya paro. Boyal paro, that we see by Moshe Rabbeinu, the Zohar HaKadosh says that this is the deepest place in the Zohar HaKadosh, because it says that Moshe Rabbeinu was terrified to enter into the chambers of Paro. Why? Because the chambers of Paro are the chambers of Ra in this world. It's the apparent presence of something negative. The deepest, most difficult question in the world. How can it be that there's something bad? And Rav Tzadok HaKohen Milublin and every tzaddik in their own way addresses this very issue of that fear that Moshe Rabbeinu had when he was coming close to Paro. But the Zohar HaKadosh asks a question, Boyel Paro, Lecha Paro mi boilei. Why does it say come to Paro? It should say go to Paro. Elamah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was speaking to Moshe Rabbeinu from within the palace of Paro itself. Hashem was already there. The unity of godliness, the Echad, is always already there at the heart of the palace of Paro, which is why the whole sugya of Geulas Mitzrayim and Galus Mitzrayim, Hashem could have taken the Jewish people out of Egypt, no problem. The Iker was to force the house of Paro to be the one to drive the Geula. Because it's only the real Gilui, like the Ramchal teaches us, is when we could be mahapech everything that appears to be Ra into something that's good in the aspect of Nachem Ish Gamzu, of Gamzu L'Toiva. Ubalifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when he comes in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, almost like it's the inner meaning of the Zohar. When he came to Paro, he comes close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Amar Lefanav, he says to him, Rabbeinu Shel Olam, Yesh Lecha Adam Kazeh. Again, seeing the Osios Yesh associated with Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva is also associated with the Yisachar. It's the aspect of Yesh Schar, the Shai Olamos. What? The Shai Olamos, right? The La'asad HaKadosh Baruch Hu Lahanchil, the Kol Talmid Chacham Shai Olamos, Moshe Kasav Lahanchil Olav Yesh, right? That's it. Ashreichem, right? Absolutely. And Ashreichem as the Osios Aviation, it also. So he says, Rabbeinu Shalom, Yesh Lecha Adam Kazeh. You have a person like this. V'ata noisen Torah al yadi, and you're giving the Torah through me. Meaning Rabbi Akiva, who understands suffering, Rabbi Akiva understands kol koitz v'koitz, the tilei tilim shel halacha. He knows he's worthy of the Torah. You're giving it through me. There's an amazing teaching that I saw from Rav Itchemeyer Morgenstern, brought down in the name of the Rebbe Rashab. Now, this teaching, I believe what happened was that the tzaddik Rav Elimelech Biderman Shlita saw this teaching, and he brought it down in his Gilyon, and then it became really a popularized teaching. It's a remarkable teaching. The Rebbe Rashab brings down, based on the Zohar HaKadosh, and based in places in Chazal, that say that Moshe Rabbeinu and Adam HaRishon saw the Sefer HaToldos. They saw all of the generations. And basically, the Sefer was brought in front of Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu was meant to see. He's like, I don't deserve to bring the Torah. Moshe was, batal b'tachlis habitul. He was absolutely nothing. It was a translucent thing. There was no self there. And so Moshe Rabbeinu didn't feel that it was appropriate to give the Torah through him. And so HaKadosh Baruch Hu showed him each and every generation. And each generation, Moshe said, okay, I'm still in the game, I can still do it, until he showed him the generation of Ikvasa the Mashiach, our generation. And again, Ikvasa is the Lashon of Akiva, right? It's the same language of Akev, right? Vahaya Akev Tishma'un, the Tzaddikim point out, Akev is Rabbi Akiva, Tishma'un is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, because the two of them represent two pathways of understanding Torah Sheba'al Peh, Nigla and Nister. So over here he says, so Moshe Rabbeinu sees our generation, he says, I can't do this. Give the Torah to them. I can't do what they do. I can't find good in what they go through. I can't see the light at the end of those days. And Moshe Rabbeinu said, give it over to them. And then Hashem had the same response. Moshe, it's through you that they're doing this. You're there. It's all you. Nishmas Yisrael, the soul of the Jewish people, is the collective soul of Moshe Rabbeinu. We're all part and parcel of Moshe Rabbeinu. And the Iker Tachlis is to bring Moshe Rabbeinu from Chutz La'aretz into Eretz Yisrael. So the Das of Moshe can be recollected to the point that we can draw down a Torah of Atika Stima, a Torah that is the Torah of Moshe Rabbeinu, which is the Mashahaya Hu Sheyihiyeh. Mashiach Tzidkenu, the question that comes out of the Poskim about Hilchos Mashiach, and especially with the Rambam, the Rebbe Rav Vittchemeyer has a mimer on this, about how could it possibly be that the Orach Chaim HaKadosh implies that Mashiach is better than Moshe on some degree in terms of Nevuah. It can't be. It's impossible that anybody or anything will be more expressive of goodness and reality than Moshe Rabbeinu. The Raya Mehemna. Moshe Rabbeinu is Hakol. Min ha'tchila ad hasof. And so really what it is, the way that Tzaddikim are masbir it, it's that it's going to be the guf of Mashiach with the neshama of Moshe Rabbeinu fully expressed in it. But sof davar kol nishma, it's all Moshe Rabbeinu. And Hashem says to Moshe, Moshe, this is you. It's halacha l'Moshe Misinai. This koyach to get through it is only through that sha'ah, the sha'ashuim of Torah. That's the only way that the Jewish people survive. And so, what does the Rebbeinu Shalom answer to him? He says, you have a person like this, and you're giving the Torah through me. This is how it arose in my will. This is how it arose in my thought. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov and the Vilna Gaon point out, most of the tzaddikim point out, this was not some capricious response on behalf of HaKadosh Baruch Hu saying, stop asking questions. But rather, Rabbi Nachman says, you want to understand the question? You have to ascend, stop speaking, enter into a place of shtika, which is higher than speech, which is beyond rational knowledge, and go to that place above machshava. Go to that place above your rational thinking, above your ability to understand why and how, and live in that place of pure emunah. That's how you're going to understand the answer. Shtoik kach Allah b'machshava. The Vilna Gaon in his famous Igeres Hagra that he wrote to his family as he was embarking on the mission to come to Eretz Yisrael, wrote as follows. He says, Kol rega v'rega sha'adam soitem es piv, zoiche litoim es or haganos. That every moment that a person chooses volitionally to close their mouth, to live in silence, to live with that secret of silence in their lives, so in that point they're tasting the concealed light, which is this light of kach Allah b'machshava. Amar lefanav, Moshe Rabbeinu says again, relating to his panim. Moshe Rabbeinu wants to understand. He went to the Achorai, he went to understand the experience of Rabbi Akiva, and then he's choizer, and it's Amru lefanav. Moshe Rabbeinu is still being mavakish, panim el panim, because that azus the kedusha of even though we can't ever be zochet to panim el panim, that doesn't mean that we stop asking for a second to be zochet to panim el panim. The secret is yearning, panecha avakesh. I yearn for your face, I yearn for your case, mavakshe panecha sela, yearning for it, but still recognizing that I can't have it. So Moshe Rabbeinu keeps saying, Amar lefanai, Amar lefanav. So Moshe Rabbeinu says again, Amar lefanav, Rebbeinu Shalom, harisani tairaso, harini scharo. You showed me his Torah, now show me his reward. Show me his reward. Show me how it turns out for him. Amar loi chazar la'acharecha. Again, go back. Enter back into that place of acharayim. You can't understand this from a perspective of panim. Chazar la'acharev. And here Chazal are telling us again, he did exactly what he was told, because it wasn't just a reference point, it was the way that he was going to be zoiche to understand the schar of Rabbi Akiva. If the Torah is calling it schar, that was his schar. It's not saying, oh, what was his schar, and then you see suffering. No, but emes, this was the schar, on one level or another. So chazar la'achayr, if he entered back into that perception of achorayim, of seeing things from a distance, ra'a sheshayklin basroi b'mekulin, and he saw that they were shaykrin basro b'mekulin, I imagine, b'mekulin, so what does it say? B'mekulin makom hakatzbin shayklin basro keda'amar b'brachos shesarku basro b'masrekos barzel. So it's referring to the Gemara in Brachos on the Samach Aleph Amud Beis that says that they were combing his skin with bronze and combs. and he saw the death of Rabbi Akiva, Amar Lefanav, Moshe Rabbeinu again returns back from that Acharayim state. He's so overwhelmed, and he says, how could this be? I need to know. Amar Lefanav, give me panim. Tell me exactly what's happening. Rabbeinu Shalom, Zu Torah v'Zu Schara. This is the Torah, and this is its reward. Amar Lei, the Rabbeinu Shalom says to him, Shtoik kach Allah b'machshava. Be silent. This is how it arose in front of my panim. Kach Allah b'machshava lefanai. My panim is not your panim. You can request my panim, you can search it out, but in the end of the day, kach Allah b'machshava lefanai. Even Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't know. Even Moshe Rabbeinu is the secret of Lo Yada. And when Moshe Rabbeinu learns to integrate the secret of Rabbi Akiva, which is the fact that at the heart of all knowledge, we understand that we don't know. Whereas Rabbi Nachman quotes from the Sefer Bechinas Ha'olam in Osiyad Gimel that Tachlis Hayadiyah Shaloneda, that the apex of thinking is to come to a place of not knowing. That's when we're able to unify the Torah and the Schar, the Torah of Torah Shebechsav, the struggle of Torah Sheval Peh. And this is the secret of the laughter of Rabbi Akiva. The laughter of Rabbi Akiva, the laughter of the Ramchal, the laughter of all of the tzaddikim, the laughter of Yitzchak, is the ability to see how in spite of the darkness and in spite of the seeming concealment that a person might experience in whatever level that they're experiencing it, whatever level it's revealed in the world, in truth it's going to be a birthplace of laughter. How, if you attempt to understand it from a perspective of panim, Hashem is going to tell us over and over again, Shtoik kach Allah b'machshava lefanai. You can't understand it. Find the space of Amunah, find the space of that Yish of Hadas. And with Rabbi Akiva, just one more nakuda that's connected to this, to the parsha we're in, that Yitzchak loved Esav very much. Yitzchak loved Esav. Why? He's tzayid b'fiv. He had the os tzadi in his mouth. There were certain tzaddikim that were hidden in the mouth of Esav that couldn't have been revealed without that difficulty of Esav. And who were these tzaddikim? Zak the Zohar Kadosh, Zak the Reb Tzadok. It was the neshama of Rabbi Akiva. It was the shayresh of Torah Sheval Peh, because only Yitzchak understood how to love that place in Esav. He understood that, wow, it looks very dark, it looks very scary, it looks very asui, it looks as if it's a finished thing, and it's an event that takes place, and there's nothing to do, and all it is Yeyush. And in the end of the day, Yitzchak is V'yahev Yitzchak as Esav. He loves that place. And Kitzayid B'chiv, he takes that Seda away and he elevates the Neshama of Rabbi Akiva to the extent that any time a Yid is capable of facing difficulty, it quotes with the Hishyav Shasadas and the Amunah of Achdus, they're connecting to the Neshama of Rabbi Akiva, which is the Neshama of Moshe Rabbeinu, which is the attempt to be Mechaber all of the Tzaros into the Torah itself, to be Darish al Chutz V'Kutz, and to Shimatziach Tzidkenu Be'ezras Hashem.